Most self-publishers underestimate the importance of compelling chapter titles. In this video, I'm going to talk about a very simple way to make sure that your chapter titles are compelling so that when people check out your book on Amazon and they read through the table of contents, they literally can't wait to buy your book. For that, stick around. My name's Lane. Welcome to my channel. I want to put something free in your hands. If you go to lanesebring.com/5steps, I'm going to give you my free 5-step guide to writing a #1 best-selling book, which I've done. My first book was a #1 bestseller in its category on Amazon. And in this guide, I'm going to show you the 5 steps that I use to make that happen. All right, so chapter titles are so important. They don't have to be complicated. In fact, I learned a very simple method of developing chapter titles early on from Tim Ferriss, one of his videos on this. So I'm going to share with you the method that I learned from him and how I've been able to apply it. And then I'm going to show you how to apply it as well. And it's so simple. Basically, your chapters need to have 2 elements: a hook and a promise. And by the way, this is the same thing that your book title has, right? Your title of your book is the hook and your subtitle is the promise. And so when you do a chapter title, you're basically just taking those 2 elements and bringing them down to every single chapter. And so what I typically do, I think about the promise first. And the promise is, what is this chapter delivering? What is the value of this chapter? When my reader reads this chapter, what problem am I helping them solve? What thing am I helping them work through? What new skill am I teaching them? What is the promise of the chapter? Really think that through. What is it delivering? And write that down. And that's going to be a pretty straightforward sentence or phrase. Now we want to talk about the hook. What is the hook? The hook is going to be something that relates to the promise, but is more catchy. It's more pithy, it's shorter. Maybe it doesn't explain the whole thing, but it's at least enough to get people's attention. And then the way you structure the chapter title is you're going to put the hook first. And the way I do it is I put the hook, and then I put a colon, and then in italics, I put the promise. So it's literally the hook, which is going to be brief, colon, and then italicized promise. The reason why I say that is because the chapter title is actually the hook. That's the chapter title. But then the promise in italics is going to kind of give the reader, when they're looking through the table of contents, they see the hook, they think, what's that? Then they see the promise and they go, oh my gosh, that's interesting. I have to know how to do that. Let me give you a couple of examples from my second book, Become a Preaching Ninja. One chapter is actually called Mindset Meltdown. Okay, so that's the hook, Mindset Meltdown. The person might read that and go, what is that supposed to be? But then the italicized promise is destructive mindsets that can wreck your preaching. Okay, so Mindset Meltdown, colon, and then destructive mindsets that can wreck your preaching. So what that does is it shows the reader, okay, here's the promise. The promise is, I'm going to show you the destructive mindsets that can wreck your preaching. And so it kind of gives them a little bit of a teaser of what's going to happen in the chapter. And they're thinking, well, I don't want those destructive mindsets. I better read this chapter. Another chapter is called Finishing Touches. And then the promise is getting your sermon ready to preach. So the hook is finishing touches, right? And I just want to mention that this doesn't have to be a big kind of massive, oh my gosh, what an incredible hook. It can be as simple as finishing touches. It's still a hook. It's still a little bit intriguing. It still doesn't tell the whole story. And then getting your sermon ready to preach is intriguing enough of a promise that the reader, if they're in my target market and they're reading through the table of contents, they're going to see that and say, oh my gosh, I need to know how to put the finishing touches on my sermon and get it ready to preach. So I hope you can see that this doesn't have to be a complicated process. It's a very simple, straightforward. What's the hook and what's the promise? Put the hook first and the promise after that. And what you're going to have is a bunch of chapter titles that don't tell the whole story because they're not supposed to. They're supposed to create interest by building tension to get the reader in the process of saying, oh my gosh, this looks interesting. I've got to read this book. That's the goal. In this video right here, I actually show you how to make sure that every part of your book leads the reader to want to see the next part of your book. Definitely check that out. If you want more videos on self-publishing, personal development, and online business, be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next video.